Mr. Longfellow! Art class, Mr. Longfellow! Art class, art class! It's time for art class with Mr. Longfellow. Hey there, James John Lyons. Today, I want to talk about squares. Not just any squares, paper squares, like the kind you would need for origami, or maybe making snowflake, or any other project where you need a square paper. So it's really easy if you have them, but what if your papers are not square? What if you just have random scraps of paper from the recycling, or torn out pages from your notebook, or even printer paper? Not square. How do we make them square? Let's work on that. All right, let's say you have a blank sheet of paper. It's not a square. The easiest way to do this is take one corner and we're gonna fold it up. And you wanna make this edge line up with this edge so it makes a triangle. And this type of triangle is called a right triangle. This has got this corner here. You want that paper corner right there. And then this piece gets removed. Now, if you have scissors, you can just go and cut it off. You could trace a line first, then open it up and cut. Or you can fold it if you don't have pencil and paper handy. And if you're really careful, you can crease it with your fingernails really well. And it will start looking like a square. You can remove this piece. Crease it. You gotta rub your fingernails in there. And you can just tear it right off. No scissors, no pencils, just like that. You can always use scissors if you want to. And now we have a square. So what if your only paper is notebook paper? That works too. It's got this weird stuff on it, so we probably want to get rid of that. But we can use the same idea to make that work. We just got to be a little more thoughtful about our process. So I'm looking at this paper and I don't want the holes or the rough edge. So I can't take this and fold it over to match up the smooth edges, because then I have this rough stuff still. So I need to think about this corner and bring it up just far enough, and I want to be careful to make sure that this line kind of lines up with this side. You could even use these blue lines on here. So you can match up this edge with the blue line. And that, if you do it nice and straight, will end up giving us a square. So this is where scissors come in handy, because we're gonna cut off some of this. So we can cut off all this extra stuff. You can go ahead and cut it. You can trace it with a pencil if you want. I might try that. Let's see how that goes. Traced. And this blue paper already has this line, so I just need to remember that's the line I cut at. I can open it back up. I can see my notes to myself. And let's cut it out. Cutting nice and straight will get me a square. I'll just cut along this blue line. All right, line paper helping us out. And now we have a square. Could do some origami. Okay, so what if you just have a random piece of scrap paper that's not even close to looking like a square? We can find a square in here, we just have to be careful. So if we're looking at our paper, we want to find like probably the biggest space. So this spot seems a little bigger, so I'm gonna fold it kinda like this. You just want to find enough paper that it overlaps. And this is where you kind of have to be tricky about it, or maybe do some trial and error. We're gonna salvage as much of this as we can. And now we want to make a triangle, but we gotta make sure it's a nice triangle. And if you have a ruler, you could measure it out because you want each side to be the same length. If you have like a notebook or a sketchbook or another piece of paper, you can use that to kind of eyeball it here and see if you can make it work. I'm gonna try just guessing. If you want a perfect square, you're gonna need to measure it. But if you're okay with a slightly off square, you could probably eyeball it just fine. And then I'm gonna trace my corner here, right on top of my paper. So now I have this triangle. I think I did pretty good at guessing. Seemed pretty close. This one might be a little longer, so it might be slightly crooked. And then we just cut it out. As long as we can fold our paper and find a triangle, once we open it up, we'll get a square. And if I would have measured, I could have gotten a much more perfect square, but this is pretty good for right now. I could probably make a fortune teller or something out of this, or any simple origami. It's a tiny square. All right, now that you've seen how that works, I want to show you a simple explanation of why it works. And it all has to do with squares and triangles. All right, so I'm going to explain a little vocab to you here. I want to talk about this word, perpendicular. Don't worry about it, but I'm going to show you what it is. When two lines meet together like a T, the way that they meet, where one's flat and one's straight, whether it's this way or it's that way, that's called perpendicular. That means that they're kind of opposite, running into each other. And that's kind of important for what we're doing here. And you didn't even know it, but you're already, if you can make a paper square, you're already a master of perpendicular lines. So when we have a triangle, those two lines right there are perpendicular. And in math, sometimes people mark them with this little square line to say, hey, look, this makes a square. Speaking of making a square, if we take this triangle and we put a mirror up to it, we pretend there's a mirror there right along this edge, we'll see the reflection of that triangle, which then, if we draw it out, fits together to make a square. So we're using a lot of math concepts here that we don't really have to think about too much because we can see it happening on the paper. But all this stuff, right triangle, square, perpendicular, symmetry, all that's happening when you're folding that paper. All right, you might be thinking, did we just do art or did we do math? We did both. There's a lot of connections between art and math. Either way, you can still have fun. Ha 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 ha.